Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast this week is American singer-songwriter Amy Rigby. Amy, it's wonderful to get you on. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Now you've got that lovely American accent, but you reside in the UK. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, it's been 1 year this week that since we relocated from upstate New York to Norfolk.
Do you enjoy the contrast of the UK to America? Is there a big contrast? Just tell
Oh,
us.
it is a big contrast, and I've always liked to come to England. I first I came here in the late 70s, and even in 1981. Went to St. Martin's in London for a year. So I've kept, just kind of kept coming back, and then started playing here in the early 2000s, playing in the UK. So I've always really liked coming, but yeah, it's always been it's weird being here like all the time now, because I enjoyed that. I always enjoyed the contrast and like
Yeah.
landing, and just like the different currency and the different food and the cups of tea. And yeah, so now it's kind of like it's yeah, I go the other way. When I go to America, it's like everything's so loud and chaotic, and yeah, it's just like it's I think I like the calmness though here.
Yeah, yeah. And what was life like growing up for you, Amy? Was there much music or and faith, for example, in your young household?
Well, I grew up in a Catholic family. My father was Irish American and my mother was Italian. And so big churchgoers, Catholic school, um, and big family. I have four brothers, and so music was my parents weren't musicians, but they were big like pop music fans. Burt Bacharach, Frank Sinatra. This was back, all the great like Broadway musicals of the 50s and 60s. So I really liked all that, and took piano, and just I grew up in Pittsburgh, which had great radio stations like in the 60s. They're kind of AM radio that played all the great pop hits. Was very, like hearing Ode to Billy Joe on the radio is like still such a vivid memory for me. All those records that came out in the 60s made a huge impression. And then I discovered Elton John, when he kind of started having hits, and that was, I think he was really my gateway into just like becoming a total music fanatic.
Was so he Elton John would have been kind of the first kind of person you became kind of a fan of. I remember my own childhood. I'm for what it's worth, Amy, I'm a huge Depeche Mode fan who
Oh, okay.
my transition kind of went through early 80s bands like Blancmange and Yazoo and Alison Moyet and all those kind of artists.
uh,
Was Elton John kind of what was it about him that kind of you thought, yeah, this guy's got something special?
well, he wasn't my first pop crush, because I, loved the Monkees, and um, kind of that, like the Partridge Family, and kind of that was my younger years. But then, like, Elton John was like the first artist where I just was like, it wasn't like about having a crush on a
Mm.
pop idol. I saw this artist like creating this whole world with his songs and his artwork, the albums, and just the whole story of him. Um, and this persona, he was the first one that I just would sit, and like study the. I knew like every credit on every album, like who did the graphic design, who was the photographer,
Yeah.
just like. And so that was, I think all the details became so important in a way that the kind of pop music of my younger years hadn't been.
And when did the intention move to become a professional musician? And when that decision was made, was there any kickback from the family? Did they want you to go and get a proper job, inverted
Oh,
commas?
they always did till the day my till the day my father died, in the at the age of 95. He still, I think, hoped that I would, get like a regular job. But I was a visual artist and applied to go to art college in New York City, and they did let me go, even though it was the 70s and New York was really kind of like a dirty, dangerous place. But they trusted me enough to, like, let me go there. And so that was kind of, I think there were jobs in art back then, like you could work in an ad agency, or you could, I studied illustration because that I felt like I could tell my dad, like, I can get a job like drawing fashions, or just drawing for some kind of company, or like free, kind of freelance work rather than be a fine artist. But so that put me right in New York, where I wanted to be, where at that time was when CBGB's was going, and all the punk, Patti Smith, the Ramones, Blondie, and then all the British bands started coming over. So they'd kind of lost me before I ever really got, down the road of like playing music myself. Um, Music was just like my passion, and and so it wasn't, I becoming like a professional musician kind of took a while. I was a fan first, and then in the early 80s, just like started getting into country music, and listening to song, really like studying songs. And suddenly, like, I just realized I could write songs that were like country song. They had the kind of story and the linear quality of the lyrics of country music. So yeah, like punk hadn't really inspired me to pick up. Well, I did briefly play drums in a band, in the punk days, but I think like everybody did back then. Like I kind of put that away. And when I discovered songwriting, that was kind of what made me want to play in a band and like get up on stage and just really pursue that instead of visual art.
Yeah, and regarding the kind of the pop period, sorry, the punk period, not the pop period, the punk period, Amy, what was it, do you think, that was the attraction of it? Was it the rebellious kind of edge to the music, or was it was it the lyrics that were being said, or was it you just being kind of an angry young person?
I, I
Can you
don't know
define
that
it?
I don't know that I was angry, but I did like the energy, and I'd loved Jeff Beck, I'd loved Led Zeppelin, The Who, Fleetwood Mac, all of that. Um, I guess it was a little bit of a reaction against, like, getting to go to a club and see musicians like right up close, instead of having to go to a huge arena to see Elton John, or someone that, like, who were so far away they might not have even been real. Going to CBGB's and having it be so right in your face. And I just liked the vibe. I liked the kind of club atmosphere, that it was a very small kind of world of fans. And yeah, so it was all of that. And I just liked the direct quality of the music. It didn't necessarily have to be like loud or fast or angry. I loved the raincoats and the slits and X-ray specs. So these were bands with women in them, doing and behaving and dressing in a way that I hadn't had
Mm.
a chance to see, like Patti Smith as well. But she was almost in the old tradition of a male rock star. Whereas these bands that came from England, it just seemed so imaginative and kind of free, that really just spoke to me.
Do they still remain icons for you, Amy? I mean, I know, I look back on my childhood. Susie Sue was a huge influence on me as a young guy, along with Robert Smith from The Cure, and they remain important kind of parts of my life puzzle, really.
Well,
Does that occur for you?
I went to see Gina Birch of the Raincoats. She just released her second solo album, and I went to her record release in London last month. And and I've stayed friends with her all these years. Because it was such a small scene. Like when the Raincoats and the Slits came to New York, I worked at this club that was kind of like it was very homemade, and both of those bands played there, and it was, they stayed at our house, in our apartments, and
Mm,
we, like, hung out. It was just it wasn't like a pro music world. It was really homemade.
yeah.
And so that we all felt like we were on the same, even though they were on stage, and well, there wasn't a stage, they were just on the floor of the club. But yeah, we all kind of felt like we were just part of this big scene. Well, it was a small scene. But anyway, I went to see Gina last month, and yeah, just seeing her up on stage, she is like a huge figure in my life. It's almost, I can't even, in some ways she feels still like this icon, and then in other ways she's my friend.
Mm,
um but I can't even, it's like I can't even speak to her about it, or even to you really, and say like how powerful
yeah.
it is sometimes. I mean, I feel that way with my own husband sometimes. It's, like I listened to his records in my dorm room and just thought he was like this Martian that, was like speaking directly to me, but like this alien, and just had like such a power that, yeah, sometimes it is kind of like it makes my head spin, kind of like it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I get it a little bit. I'm hopefully doing some work with a music artist who's pretty well known, and I met him for the first time a few months ago, and it was a bit of a surreal moment. I know how much this individual is regarded by his group of fans, and for me to be having kind of a cup of coffee with him did feel completely surreal. Amy, just regarding the songwriting, I think songwriting is such a gift. A couple of questions. Regarding your songwriting, did you know straight away your talent as a songwriter, or were you craving, or did you need affirmation of that? Did you need somebody to tell you that you were good at this craft?
um that's a good question. I think maybe it was enough to bring a song to my peers, like my band at, when I first started, was my one of my brothers and friends, just we'd all been music fans together, and to be able to bring a song to them and have them go like, that's a real song, we can do that one, like that was kind of
Mhm.
enough. I also just felt like the first song that I wrote, I went home, and like I wrote it as I was walking through New York City, and went home and was like looking through my cassettes going like, did I steal this? Like, is this a song that I've already heard and I just like forgot, and wrote it all down and it's actually already existed? Or did I, and it seemed so real to me. Like I never doubted that, yeah, once I figured out that it was mine and no one had heard the lyrics before it, maybe the melody was a bit, derivative, but there's only so many chords,
Yeah.
um but no, I think that was the one thing. I just always felt like I believed that like songs were just like, I guess, since this is the Godcast, you could say they were like given to me by some higher power, like, and still feels that way when I sit down with a thought and go like, no, I could write something about, and then like 3 minutes later, I have a song that didn't exist before that does just feel like some kind of magic or some kind of spirit like moving
Yeah.
through me.
It is a question I ask most musicians, is it a skill you've acquired, or is it a gift that you've always you've received? And so what are you saying there, Amy? Are you saying you feel it is a gift?
I do feel like it's a gift. I feel like, there was a point after like having bands and then starting to make my own solo records. There was a point where I wanted to test myself and I wanted to move to Nashville and be like on that like professional playing field with people who like made money, even lots of money from writing songs. And, I had a daughter, I had a family, I felt like I had a family to support. And so I wanted to test myself and see if I could do this, and I did. And so maybe being there, I felt like I got better. Like I felt like being in that competitive situation. And I'm not saying like I changed what I was doing to fit in a marketplace more. I actually went in the opposite direction. I honed what was uniquely my voice and
Mm,
style
mm.
of writing. And so I think that, so both, it was the gift, but also, yeah, like a lot of, I mean, sometimes when I look back at songs I wrote when I was in my 20s, and I wish I could like write ones like that again, where I didn't know what I was really like. I didn't feel constrained
Mm.
by just like I don't know, even by my catalog, my legacy, like whatever it is I've already done. I just was
Mm.
kind of like making it up, and so that was kind of wonderful and seemed just as valid as the songs that are better because I got better. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and songwriting, Amy, for you, a couple of questions again. Is that when you kind of sit at the piano, or wherever when the initial idea arrives, do you, even though you've not written the words, do you know where the end point is going to be? So if it's a song, or do you just let your mind run? And the other question, just to give you two at the same one, is about um, how much do you want to, how much of the story do you want to give to the person that's going to receive it? One of the things I personally enjoy about songwriting is when a song is quite ambiguous. So it's not just what the singer is telling me what they think. It makes me go away and actually think about what's been sung, if that makes sense.
Uh-huh. um I think I generally try, even if I have like a solid idea or phrase that I'm working from, I try to not know what it is that's driving the whole thing, and just discover as I'm writing. Let things kind of unfold. I guess I give an example. My When my dad died 2 years ago, I he was Irish American, like I said, and a friend said, "Well, what are you going to sing at the funeral?" And what about Danny Boy? And I just wrote in my notebook, "For God's sake, don't sing Danny Boy." And so that turned into this song. Now it could have been like a funny song, and it is kind of funny when that line comes in, but I found myself just talking about this Irish Catholic man and his kind of whole history, and in a way like I wasn't expecting to do that. I wasn't expecting to kind of tell my whole, I'm going to start crying, to tell my dad's whole life story in three
Mm,
minutes, but I did.
mm.
And so that's how things work. I mean, that I think that was like a really kind of special song because because my dad had just died and I was feeling this intense emotion. And also I knew that I had a gig coming up at the Irish Arts Center in New York City, and I with this Irish poet Paul Muldoon, and I was like, oh my God, this is like one gig my dad would actually like, he would get it. He would be
Mm.
proud, like a
Yeah.
lot of the ones he was like,
Yeah.
you're playing in a bar that serves pierogies, or like I don't know, just like you're in a biker bar, you're in a bookstore, but this was one where he could actually, so I felt like he would be proud. So that kind of fueled the whole thing. But yeah, like I didn't really know when I start, like what it's gonna be. And so I think that is why I love writing, and I've written a blog as well for many years. Like I've written online, and now I've written two books. um, I've just finished the second one, and even though I those are memoirs, and I know, like, well, I know, like, I went here, here, and here, and this is what happened. You don't really know till you're actually doing it what's gonna like stick, and what's gonna like what things are gonna come to the fore. So it's still kind of works like
Yeah.
that way.
I was going to ask you if you still enjoyed the writing, but it's clear that you do, and it's still you've still got that love and passion for it, and the ability to write stuff that moves yourself, and obviously clearly moves other people as well. What a question I always like to ask, if you don't mind me asking, Amy, is are you satisfied with the career that you've had thus far? I think quite often I interviewed a guy called Jonathan Higgs, who's the lead singer of a band called Everything Everything, and
Uh-huh.
and they've had relative success. They've done pretty well. But I asked him that question, are you satisfied? He went, well, he said it with an element of humor, but an almost an element of real truth. He went, well, we should have been bigger. Obviously, and I wonder how you reflect on your career. Are you satisfied with what you've achieved?
I mean, I do feel lucky that or satisfied that I can like still get to go out and play gigs, and but yeah, I would love to be playing in like the Union Chapel or somewhere, like um but I might be in like a little basement bar in London instead of this grand place, or and I guess I never I never want to like give up and say like I've reached, this is it. You never know what's going to happen. And so I guess the answer is like yes and no. I'm happy that like it's not a given that anyone will want to come see you play. So I feel lucky that I at least like the times where that era where I kind of started, it felt possible to like have a career in music, which I don't, my daughter's a musician, and
Mm.
I don't, there's just like, it's just a very different kind of world now. And to even like go to Nashville and be able to like get a publishing deal that paid my bills
Mm.
for a period of time, and so that I could work on music. That was kind of a dream, and I realized that dream, and it's kind of, in retrospect, it's kind of incredible because I don't think those opportunities really exist so much anymore.
Yeah, well, I was gonna ask Amy, what's your assessment of the musical industry? I asked this again of many musicians. I remember recently Guy Fletcher, who was the keyboard player in Dire Straits. So, absolutely furious at the deal that musicians get these days, and how it is almost impossible to make a living out of record sales because everything is kind of so disposable, and people can download. What do you make of it for young musicians?
Well, I guess there was a point, I guess, in the early to mid 2000s where I stopped having so much like record deals and started just like hustling myself rather than expecting someone else to do it. And, just started like pressing up my own CDs, started, just like hand drawing covers and like going to a copy machine. And so I guess I became more DIY. and publish my own books. So I actually feel like I do make probably more money, you know, from other things and doing it myself than maybe I would have made from a record deal back in the day, where someone would be more putting up the money to get it all out there and
Mm.
promote it and stuff. But I would not, like I wouldn't have necessarily seen any of that money, or it would have. So anyway, I think, there's definitely downsides, and it is really sad, when you think, when we started, you could expect some kind of like royalties, or like even for performance of like a song getting played on um, the radio, or people even going to play shows and trying to sell records nowadays. It's really gone down, like, and I'm talking about an audience of like 75 people to 100 people used to buy a lot more CDs than the same audience nowadays. But they buy books. I make tea towels and screen print aprons and tote bag. You just have to like diversify, I think,
Mhm.
and just like get as many people pay to subscribe to my Substack. It's not a lot of money. I mean, it's like pretty paltry, but I don't feel myself furious, because it just, the world has changed. The world has changed, and some of it is better and some of it's a lot worse. But there's some things that we can do, that to kind of like try to keep afloat.
Yeah, yeah. And still doing it, Amy. You've got gigs coming up, have you?
I do. I have well, like I said, I have my first book came out 6 years ago. And it took me a while to write that one. And now the second one is coming out in the fall. And so I have a bunch of gigs in the US, trying to book some things in the UK. For now, I just have one festival that I'm playing in Norfolk, just down the road from where we live. It's called the Suffield Fiesta, and that's on August 30th. But yeah, hopefully a couple things in November in the UK, and yeah, the playing a bunch of things in the US in September, October. And, mostly, yeah, like a combination of reading and songs that go with the stories in the book,
Yeah.
which is called Girl to Country. That's the first book was Girl to City, and the second book is called Girl to Country.
And where can people get this, Amy, if they're listening or watching this and they go, "Oh, I'd like to take this in." Do you have a website or?
I
Uh,
do have I
yeah,
do have a website. It's just amyrigby.com. And I should be taking pre-orders pretty soon for the book. And you can find the first book on there. I also did the first book as a podcast. So it's called Girl to City, a memoir podcast, and that's on like Apple Podcasts and all the different places where people get their podcasts. And that's 20 episodes, 20 chapters. And I think I'll do the same thing for the second
yeah,
book, because I really enjoyed doing that. It was just like a nice way to rather than I love audiobooks and I listen to a lot of them, but it was kind of nice having each chapter be its own little world, and its own little episode.
Well, I feel obliged to plug my own book, Amy. If you'd like to try an audio book, I have a book as well. It's called Our Daily Bread: From Argos to the Altar. This tells about my life prior to Argos, but also about some of the issues around social injustice. But it's on Amazon if you want to
Oh,
check it
and
out.
when did that come out,
It
Alex?
came out in 2022,
Uh-huh.
and it was forwarded by Alistair Campbell, and I'm really proud of it. But
Oh,
it's not about me. But if you like an audiobook, it is there, so check it out. So
oh no, well,
yeah,
well done. I mean, as you know, like it is an accomplishment to conceive and finish a book and get it out, and
yeah,
it's it's a great experience, like
It
to
is.
see it
Yeah.
through. So thanks. I'll definitely look for it.
Well, Amy, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Music is my passion. I love all genres of music, and I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, and learning a bit about the beginnings and where you are now. So, Amy, thank you so much for coming
Oh,
on the
thanks,
podcast.
Alex. It was great to talk to you. And yeah, thank you so much.
God bless.
Thanks. Bye.